Okay, thank you for the invitation to speak today as a panel member. Just to give everyone a bit of a background, I'm a veterinarian and I currently consult for Sebi Livestock, and I've been working in the area of livestock contributions to food and nutrition security for a number of years, with a particular interest in chickens. So that the poll results actually seg straight into my discussion of different poultry systems and how far we've come. So domestication of chickens happened thousands of years ago, and it's only relatively recently that intensive production systems have come about. So traditionally, poultry have tended to be raised in extensive and low input systems, and these systems still predominate in many low and middle income countries. Um, what we see in these systems is that there are minimal inputs required, and so it makes it a very accessible form of livestock for many people, including women. And it can be one of the only species of livestock that women can actually raise. So these are some pictures from Timor-Leste, where I did some field work, and chickens there generally tend to roost in trees or in very simple baskets that are made from local materials. And these chickens form part of the household's livelihood strategy. So they are a living bank, and they make small contributions to income and household food security. The nutrition profile of traditionally raised chickens and eggs seems to be fairly similar to the commercially produced chickens and eggs, even though they tend to be smaller. So actually, their concentration of nutrients is sometimes higher. There is high local demand because of their taste. They're much tastier than commercially produced chickens, and they're often incorporated into local cultural ceremonies. In these systems, when chickens are utilized, the whole carcass is consumed, so including nutrient-rich organs such as the liver or the kidneys. And they usually fetch a higher price at market than commercially available products. They also provide some ecosystem services, such as producing manure for crop fertilization and as pest control for other livestock species. So these systems do still exist, and they contribute a lot to households. However, what we're seeing, if we look back through time, is that the population of chickens has grown significantly in some places, but also shrunk in some other places. If we look at productivity, however, the picture is a little bit different. There's just continued growth all over the world with concentrations in certain areas. So the drivers for these the growth in chicken production, our growth in human population, household incomes, and urbanization, and the convenience that it is that you can produce a lot of food for a lot of people at a relatively low cost. Um, the population of, populations have only slightly increased, but productivity has increased massively due to intensification. And as we saw from the poll, a lot of countries really rely on intensive production of poultry products to produce enough food. As we heard from Bharati, animal source foods, including poultry, play a really important part in nutrition security, especially where nutrient availability and access is limited. So because of because of the changes that are projected for low and middle income countries, the demand for animal source food is projected to continue to increase. And when you look at different countries' livestock plans and policies, the intensification of poultry is often the selected pathway for massive increases in production. So a lot of these policies aim to target pre-commercial farmers to intensify production by moving into highly intensive systems, and also by moving traditional scavenging poultry systems to what they call semi-improved systems, where introduction of exotic breeds and improved management systems are introduced. So much of the world does use intensive poultry production, and it is seeming to become it's the pathway along which we are going for much of the rest of the world. And I guess the positives of intensive production is that you do have optimization of production. So everything is calculated so that you get efficient growth of the chickens, and you have economies of scale. You also have a reliable supply of poultry products, so they can supply the supermarkets, and there's always product available for consumers. The massive increases in production have decreased the cost of chicken meat and eggs to consumers. So in high-income countries, they are the one of the least costly forms of high-quality protein that is accessible, other than processed meats. Um, so the demand continues to be high, partly because of health concerns. So the push towards white meat over red meat because of the health concerns associated with red meats, also because of the price, but also now there is growing awareness of environmental issues. So chicken and egg production is one of the least greenhouse gas emissions intense of all the livestock products, and people are starting to think about these things as they make their food choices. They also produce very high profit margins for producers. But if we look at some of the disadvantages and externalities, because they require such high capital and such a lot of inputs, it does restrict the number of producers to those who can provide that. So it becomes a less accessible form of livestock for most of the population. To achieve high levels of production, human edible foods are used. So grains that could be used to feed people are being diverted to poultry. And also, more land is cleared to be able to produce crops for feeding to our poultry, intensively produced poultry. We have globalization of a small number of genetic strains. So those strains that have been identified to be highly productive and to cope well under these intensive systems, these get shipped around the world in the form of parent stock or day-old chicks. This massive network and the concentration and crowding of animals into these small spaces, relatively small, increases the risk of infectious disease and zoonoses. And even just recently in the COVID crisis, here in Scotland, poultry farms were one of the first places to close because of outbreak of COVID in the humans, because of the conditions, favorable conditions for disease spread. There are also animal welfare concerns. So we have really pushed these chickens to be highly productive, and their muscular growth often outstrips their skeletal growth, or they might be housed in quite confined spaces. And where planning hasn't really caught up with the development or process, there might be poor waste disposal. So you might have spreading of waste, which leads to runoff into river systems, or you might have air pollution in the form of ammonia. And also, I guess this is a question mark because I don't actually know the percentage of women that own or manage or directly benefit from the high incomes that are produced in these commercial systems. But certainly, I think that the opportunities to have enough capital are much lower. So there are also disadvantages to extensive systems. You do have low production rates and high mortality, limited access to healthcare, shelter, and nutrition, and the instability of flock sizes can lead to risky consumption behaviors, such as consuming, sick chickens that you wouldn't otherwise if you had the option. And the shared living quarters with humans and livestock can also increase exposure to pathogens. So there's quite a large transition between these extensive systems and commercial systems, and a lot of systems need to be in place. So to be able to transition farmers into these more intensive systems, they need access to genetic materials and feeds and health inputs. But you also need these regulatory systems to ensure that high quality feeds are used. Commercial production increases competition for local farmers, and there is increased convenience, but there's also loss of nutrients. This is just a little heat map that I want to finish with, showing that in a commercially produced chicken, generally only the meat and the skeleton is sold, and you have loss of all the organs, which are the most rich sources for vitamins and minerals such as iron, vitamin B12, and vitamin A. So I'm going to leave this with questions to open the discussion. With is intensification the best way forward? Are we happy to accept all the externalities in order to push food production, but also economic growth? Thank you very much.